Today I'm going to talk to you about ecosystem tools for administrators. So throughout the conference you might have heard a lot of stuff really focused around plugin development, that sort of thing. My talk's more focused around what you can do as an administrator of JIRA, Confluence, or other Atlassian products to make your life easier. So first, a bit about me. I've been working on the Confluence team since I started at Atlassian about 5.5 years ago. I've done a bunch of roles on the team. I've been a developer, been a technical lead, and at the moment I run a team called the Muppets. We're such awesome developers, and we thought it was a fun name to call ourselves the Muppets, because that's what people call each other when they're really dodgy. But anyway. If you ask me what my areas of interest are in relation to the ecosystem, I'd probably say first is stuff around web items and web resources. I was involved in a lot of the development of that, and Matt Quayle's presentation yesterday gave a great overview of it. If you have any questions around the details of how those things work, send me an email. I'm also well across all the user management stuff. Took the technical leadership of the project to improve the LDAP support in JIRA and Confluence recently, and Confluence-specific stuff. You can come to me with questions. So who are you guys? Who am I talking to here? I'm talking to the people who run the JIRA Confluence fisheye server in your organization. So who's that? Who runs a server? Is that pretty much everyone? Awesome. That's great. So your responsibilities, you need to keep the system up, you need to keep the data safe, but you've also got to get stuff done. You've got people asking you for changes to the system. Every day you've got a list of tasks. Users in your organization are having problems with the system or need something updated. You need to get that fixed for them as fast as possible. So what we've heard from you about what you want in Atlassian products is easier upgrades is the #1 thing we hear from admins all the time. And we put a lot of effort into that recently with the new installers, new upgraders. I hope you guys have tried them out and found that they're useful. We've seen some feedback on Twitter. It's been pretty good. I'm not really going to talk about upgrades today. What I'll talk about is operations, bulk operations, doing things, repetitive tasks, how we can optimize that for you as an administrator. You want to do offline operations. You want to have things run automatically in your organization. You don't want to have to handhold the system, be there every morning doing the same things over and over. Just in general, easier administration. These are the kind of things that we've heard from our administrators. So what you want your life to be is really putting your feet up, happy times. How can we help with that? Well, what I'm going to talk about today is remote APIs and scripting and the products you can use as an admin. I'm going to talk about some of the simple plugin points that you can use, don't involve any Java coding. I'm going to talk about the plugin points that do involve Java coding, but with a focus on those that are kind of specific to admins. And lastly, I'm going to talk about monitoring and management tools that you can use to get an insight into your application while it's running and enhance the performance or the running of the application. So let's jump straight into remote APIs. We're going to look at JIRA first. So JIRA has a bunch of different remote APIs that you're probably all aware of. The one that we're really pushing at the moment is the REST API. It's relatively new. It's being added to. We've enhanced it a lot, if you've heard about already. If you need something added to the API, please let us know, and we'll try to add it as soon as we can. Another API called the SOAP API, which has a lot more methods as far as admins are concerned. So if you're an administrator of JIRA, you're probably going to be using the SOAP API even more than you are the REST API at the moment, just because there's not as much functionality exposed through the REST yet. So I'd really recommend exploring the SOAP API so that you know what functionality is there. JSON RPC is a new kid on the block. So Charles talked a little bit about JSON RPC and Confluence yesterday. We also have a JSON RPC plugin for JIRA. The idea of that is to allow client-side developers to access the JIRA remote APIs with the same ease that Java and .NET developers can with the SOAP API. So these two APIs, the JSON RPC and the SOAP API, are no longer being expanded in JIRA. So if you need something extra, we'd encourage you to look at the REST API, perhaps develop a prototype of it, or show us what you want, and then we can get that implemented for you. The last thing in the JIRA remote APIs is XML RPC. As you probably know, it's not very comprehensive in terms of the API, and we're not expanding it further either. So as far as an admin goes, you've really got the top two options there. REST and SOAP are your bread and butter, what you should be using to automate your tasks. The remote API is really great as an admin because it's language agnostic. I'm going to be showing you some examples today that are in Python and in JavaScript. So the JavaScript runs on Node.js on the server. But of course, you can use your favorite scripting language if it's Shiny and Ruby or Perl because you need to get stuff done and you don't mind ugly code, or something more heavyweight like .NET and Java. Doesn't matter. So the first example here is an example in JavaScript, which runs on Node. And this is how easy it is to create an issue in JIRA using the REST API. One reason why I'm using JavaScript for these examples is because when you get JSON data back from JIRA, JSON's the native format for JavaScript, so you don't have to have any kind of parsing or any kind of tool to convert the data into a format that your language can use. So looking here, we're using the Node REST client module, which is on GitHub. We connect to the JIRA URL, pass in the credentials in the URL for this library. That's how it works. We construct the issue object here with the information we need to pass through to JIRA. It's pretty lightweight, summary description. You can pass through custom fields. Everything you can do on the create issue screen, you can do through this API. And lastly, we just post that data straight through to JIRA, the /issue URL. And JIRA returns a result, which includes the issue key, and we can just log that. So as an example, this is a very simple script. It's about 10 or 15 lines of code. You could use that to automate something in your workflow where you're manually creating issues for people, or you're manually taking something that gets emailed to you and convert it to an issue. Like, these are the kind of things that we like administrators to be able to do with our remote APIs. So the remote APIs aren't just for plugin developers, they're also for admins to get stuff done like this. As another example, the source code's available online for this, so you can get it at that Bitbucket project. And the Node REST client that I'm using is actually a fork to fix a few bugs with it, so you can get that on GitHub. The next example is resolving issues. And again, this is a very simple operation with the REST API. We're looking at just 2 or 3 lines of code to specify what transition we want to perform. The resolution in this case is won't fix, so maybe as an example, we could do this with any issue that's older than 3 months. We could use the REST API to query for those old issues, update them automatically on the server side. We post the data through to JIRA, to the transitions resource, and then we get a result back. This code looks a little bit more complicated because of the way Node.js works through callbacks, but essentially it gets the result back and then does a further request to JIRA to look up the details of the issue and log them. Again, this code's available on Bitbucket, and I'd encourage you to start using it and playing with it and extending it to help fill your needs as an admin. So what can you do with the REST API? Well, it's growing as we go along. So back in 4.2, we added the original REST API for issue details, voting and watching. What you might remember is that was when the UI in JIRA changed to introduce the new UI in 4.2 for voting and watching. Likewise, in 4.3, when we added attachment support, that was because of the new attachment UI required in the product. So over the last 3 or 4 versions, we've been adding things as they've been required in the product to build a new feature. If you want something specific that you know isn't going to be like a new feature of JIRA in the short-term future, you should really let us know specifically what APIs you want, because they won't magically appear. If adding remote APIs takes a fair bit of work, we have a significant number of developers on the JIRA team dedicated to building out the REST APIs at the moment. And so all the feedback that you guys can give us is going to help us develop that better for you. We'll look at a couple of examples now of how to use the SOAP API. And I'll just quickly go over these because they're very similar to how to use the REST API. This is with Python. Again, we're just creating an object that represents the issue, sending it through to JIRA. The authentication process is very simple with the SOAP API. You send through the credentials and you get a token back. That's pretty much all it is. One line of code essentially to create the issue once you have the thing created. Likewise, resolving issues via the SOAP API is fairly straightforward. You're doing a similar thing again. But what else can you do with the SOAP API? The SOAP API is the most comprehensive API in JIRA. And so there's a huge amount of admin functionality there that you can use to automate things in your workflow. Creating projects, managing notification and permission schemes, editing comments, managing comments, spam comments on public sites. You can do things, search for issues with JQL and manage them that way. So that becomes a powerful way to like archive old issues off or do those kind of workflows that you need to do in your daily job. So now let's take a look at Confluence. Confluence has a bit of a different history with regard to remote APIs. So we have different preferences in terms of what the most comprehensive API is for admins to use to get their job done. At the top of the list is the SOAP and XML RPC APIs with Confluence. So these are very comprehensive APIs. These are not deprecated in Confluence. We will still add useful functionality to those. So if you have ideas or thoughts on what kind of APIs you'd like to see in Confluence, again, send me an email or a tweet. The JSON RPC API is available in Confluence as well. At the moment, it's a plugin, but it will be bundled in a future release. And that exposes the SOAP API via JSON. I'm going to take you through an example of how that works in a minute. Lastly, the REST API in Confluence is quite small, and we're adding to it as we need to build out the application. But unlike JIRA, we don't have a dedicated team working on the Confluence REST APIs at the moment. So the REST API on the Confluence side will progress more slowly. So as an admin, if you need to get stuff done now, you don't want to wait 6 months for a new API to come out, I'd recommend using the SOAP and XML RPC ones. So JSON RPC, you saw a bit of a talk from Charles Miller on Wednesday about this. What it does is basically just a thin wrapper around the existing remote APIs for Confluence. And why would we do this? It's because for front-end code, where accessing a library for XML RPC or SOAP is too difficult, JSON RPC gives you a really lightweight way in client code to access all those APIs that we already had available in SOAP and XML RPC. So what that allows us to do is reuse this existing code. As I said, there's a lot of effort that goes into building a new REST API. If we can reuse those legacy SOAP and XML RPC APIs for the next few years from client-side code, that's something we want to promote. So that's why we built it. So how does it work? You need to install the plugin at the moment, and then you look up the method name from the SOAP API documentation that you want to hit, and you construct a URL that includes that method name in the URL. So for example, here's the Confluence API to add a comment. Any parameters that are required, you pass through in the body as JSON, which is, again, very easy to do with any kind of front-end library like jQuery. So here's an example of how it works. We've constructed, we have a function up the top here that kind of wraps the JSON RPC call that provides a kind of library access. And down here we're using it. It's just one line of code to get the comments from a Confluence page. Here we're using one of the parameters in the page, the current page ID, to get the comments on the current page. So this code is running on the page in the browser. And then we're going to iterate through the comments one by one and remove them if they have a particular creator. So this is an example where you might go through and want to remove some spam comments or something like that on a public instance. Because all the functionality of the SOAP API is exposed through this, you can do a huge amount of stuff with this by writing client-side scripts. How relevant that is to admins will probably depend on your use case. Probably more often you'll be writing back-end stuff with SOAP and XML RPC, but this is an option that you have as well. The next thing I want to talk about is the CLI. Who uses the CLI here for JIRA, Confluence, or? Okay, about half. That's cool. So for the people that don't know about it, it's like if the remote API gives you like some raw power, then the CLI is like an engine that's putting it to work and giving you really fast and easy access to all the remote APIs in the products. So what it does is it's a command line interface. It's like a single command, and there's a bunch of flags that you pass to it to invoke any of the methods in the remote APIs for the products. It's open source. It's maintained by Bob Swift. And he keeps it really up to date with the latest changes in the products. And basically the idea is why would you bother writing Python or JavaScript code when you can just throw something together with a shell script? So I mentioned that the CLI is quite comprehensive. This is the usage information for the JIRA one. So it just covers a small... All right, yeah, it covers pretty much everything. It's awesome. Yeah, it's still going. Yeah, so that's just the JIRA API, right? And there's one of those for Confluence and the other products as well. So you should really be using this in your day-to-day management of the system, because anything that you can do through the SOAP API, which is a lot of the functionality of the web interface, you can also do with the CLI. So here's an example of like how you might integrate this in your daily workflow. You have an MOTD that pops up when you log into your machine in the morning. You could have that query out to JIRA and show you the list of issues that are assigned to you as an administrator. You know, that's just one simple way you can integrate it into your workflow. I'm sure you can see many more. So now we're going to move on to scripting inside the application rather than outside. JIRA has the jelly scripting ability, which is something that's, you know, has compatibility problems, but to get stuff done as an admin, it's a really useful tool, and it's something that you should have in your toolkit. So I went to Matt Quayle, the JIRA architect, and I said, what's happening with Jelly, man? It's pretty ugly. Are we going to get rid of it? And he said, nah, there's no way we're getting rid of Jelly until there's a better alternative. So even though it might have compatibility problems when you upgrade, it's still a really good, useful tool that you should consider investing in as an administrator. So as an example of a short Jelly script, this is one that iterates through all the users in the system. You could use this to send a notification to all the people in your system, say, outage notifications or something like that. And that's something that is built right into JIRA, and you should be using it really if you're administering a service. Another way to run scripts inside JIRA is the script runner plugin. So this is a plugin that actually loads scripts off the file system. So as the administrator, you upload a Groovy script or a what are the other ones it supports? So there's Groovy, there's Jython, JavaScript is native, I think, built into the JDK. So there's a few different ones. And this integrates through the entirety of JIRA. So it's not just for running random once-off scripts, but you can integrate them into workflow actions as well. So if you have something that you want to do, like send an email to a bunch of people, or you want to when someone resolves an issue, you want to go and shut down a service on one of your servers or something like that. You can do all this kind of stuff with the script runner plugin in JIRA. There's the language support. Groovy, JavaScript, there's a couple more. On the Confluence side, we have the scripting macros. And what the scripting macros are is scripts embedded in the body of the page. So they're a macro where the body of the macro is the script that you run. Again, they're kind of ugly, but they work reasonably well. They let you get stuff done. They support similar kinds of embedded languages like Bean Shell and JavaScript and so on. So internally at Atlassian, we used this to build a support wallboard, which went out to our support database, track lists of issues and prioritize them, and integrated a whole bunch of extra functionality into our support workflow that we could then use for prioritizing support cases. So since we developed this has now been moved over to a gadget in JIRA now. But previously, the first cut of this was written using the Bean Shell macro, which is part of the scripting macros in Confluence. I think that's a great example of how powerful this stuff is as an admin or a power user in the system when you can integrate systems together using these technologies. So my challenge to you for remote APIs and scripts is to use the product scripting API to improve something in your workflow. And do it as soon as you go back. Think about what can I do tomorrow to improve my workflow with these tools. So we're going to move on now to simple plugin points in the application. So what I'm talking about here, by simple I mean plugins that don't require any coding. Because sometimes firing up that IDE or the compiler is a lot of hassle. Sometimes you might not be a Java developer, or the admins aren't Java developers. A lot of things you can do here that are quite cool. The first one I'm going to talk about is custom menu items, which it's a bit hard to see here, but this is the Confluence admin console. And these are the default options here that you get in the product. And we're going to add 3 new options here for monitoring, so we can easily get to our monitoring services. So these have a bit of a naming crisis. The reason why you might not have heard about custom menu items before is because they're called web items. That outside Atlassian, probably not many people realize what is a web item. It doesn't really mean anything. So what these do is they give you hooks into all the navigation throughout the app. And they work in all the products, although the locations where you can hook into do vary between the products. So the example I'm going to show you now is how to add these links into the Confluence UI. And you'll be surprised how easy it is. So the first step we have is we have this XML snippet that defines the web item. So we're going to code this up manually. There's a new feature in the plugin SDK now that will actually generate this for you, but we'll show you how it works under the hood. The first thing we need to specify is where in the application the link will appear. So in this case, we're saying it will appear in the configuration section in the admin, and this is a Confluence-specific location. So there's a list of all the locations in the application in our docs. We need to give it a label, and we need to give it the URL we want to point to. Fairly simple stuff. The next thing we do is drop that XML snippet into this XML template, which defines the name of your plugin and what version it is. It's fairly boilerplate stuff. The last step, final step, we're going to upload that XML file directly into JIRA or Confluence. And that's all you have to do. Now you have a new item here for New Relic, and all it took was like 2 seconds of XML file wrangling and uploading the XML file into the product. So we're going to look at it, how we get this a bit better, add some icons and maybe split it out into a separate section so that it looks a bit more pro. This again is pretty straightforward to do with the XML file. So to create the section, we write a new snippet of XML in the middle that defines the section, what its name is. It has a weight that configures where it appears in the UI, whether it's at the top or the bottom. And then we just update the section key in the web item to say we're going to be using the monitoring section for this item now rather than the configuration one. To add the icon, we use the icon XML snippet there. We're linking out to a remote icon, so we don't even need to host the icon on Confluence or in the application. We can host it wherever. And you upload that, and you've got it. You know, you've got a new section in the admin console there, or it might be a new menu in Jira's admin console, and it contains links that are specific to your job as an administrator. That's just one way you can customize the application to make it easier for you to get to the things you want to get to. The source code for that's online as well. The next one we'll look at is custom JavaScript. So this is very similar to kind of speakeasy extensions and that sort of thing, except this doesn't require the installation of any, like the speakeasy plugin first. You can do this natively in the app as an administrator. So these are called web resource plugin modules, which is probably even worse name than web items. So custom JavaScript, you can run arbitrary code on any page in the application. The possibilities with that are pretty limitless. We're going to look at a simple example where we change the destination of one of the links. So in this example, a common case is the Confluence people directory is not really your organization's staff directory. Say you have a staff directory that's a separate site. We want to change this link here to have a different destination so that people clicking on that don't get confused or get the wrong information or anything. So the first thing we have to do, we're going to create a JavaScript file that goes and changes that link using jQuery. We're going to use our XML template again, and we're going to drop in a web resource for that file. So the important parts of this are the resource here that says the location of the name of the file. And there's a context, and a context of atl.general means that this web resource will be rendered on every page in the application. We need to create a jar file here that includes our two files, and we upload that into the product, and it works. That was probably 10, 15 minutes of work, and we've overridden links in the applications. I'm sure you can see how this could be used for a great many more useful things as an administrator. Speakeasy extensions we've heard a lot about at the conference so far, so I won't go into them in any more depth. Huge benefit of them, though, is that they're opt-in and per user, so you can build these kind of JavaScript hooks in the product for specific users. So one way you might tie all this all together, all the kind of plugin modules we've looked at, is to build an admin toolbar that's visible on all the pages in the application. This is something that one of our developers did, administering his local instance. He added rebuild index, flush index queue, and just general administration links to the page. And this meant that wherever he is in the application, he can always jump straight to the things that he needs to do as an administrator. So that wraps up the simple plugin points section. And I'd really encourage you to go and investigate these plugin points, try them out, see what you can do to create quick links to things that you do all the time inside the app. Okay, next is Java plugin points. So out of the administrators before, who writes Java code? Everybody. Oh, well, that's good. That means this section will be useful. The first thing we're going to look at is event listeners. So event listeners capture activity about the system while it's running. Some of the events that you can listen to are login events or when settings are changed in the application. What you might do with that, maybe you could audit log changes in the system when they happen, or you could trigger additional behavior. There are lots of ways to do that already, but event listener plugins give you another way to do it. Perhaps more interesting is filter plugins. So filter plugins actually intercept requests as they come into the server. And this gives you an incredible amount of power. We're going to see an example of how we can use this for something quite cool. So here are a couple of ideas. We could match /secure/admin and JIRA to intercept all the admin actions. We could, again, we could match like browse people in Confluence to redirect people to a different place for the people directory or to limit access to it. I know we have customers who use Confluence with clients and they don't want their clients to see the other clients. You know, this is one way you could do that, intercept things to the people directory and add kind of finer grained access control around that if that's what you wanted. So we're going to come up with an example here of a filter plugin that sends you an email when administration settings are changed in Confluence. So this is quite a reasonably popular feature request to have better audit capabilities in the products. So I'm going to show you how you can code that up, and you'll have some demo code to play around with if you want to use it. So looking at how filters work, basically in a request, it goes through a series of steps inside the application. Filter plugins actually jump into one of the top levels of the processing stack, and they intercept the request as it passes through. This gives them a lot of power because they can actually veto requests. They can stop them progressing further through the stack, or they can let them continue. They can do additional operations when the request comes in, and they have access to all the request's information as well, the parameters, the type of request, the URL it's going to. It could change those if it wanted to. So what we're going to do with our admin action filter is we're just going to send an email off whenever we see an admin action triggered inside the app. So one thing I can't really enforce enough is that it's very, very easy to break stuff with filter plugins. In fact, like while I was developing it, I managed to lock myself out of all the admin stuff in Confluence. So make sure you test it thoroughly. Make sure you know how to like set the plugin system, like either from the file system or the database if you need to. Those kind of things can be handy if you mess up. So back to our plugin XML again. This is how we declare a servlet filter. The key parts of this one are the class name of the Java class we're going to use. And we have a URL pattern here, which is /admin/star. If we discover that there are other places in the application that are admin actions that aren't underneath /admin, like maybe UPM or something like that, we can add a bunch more URL patterns here that will match. So once we have the filter registered, we need to write the code to do something with it. And this is an example of how easy it is to capture information about a request and send off an email to a designated person whenever something changes in the system. So here we're just getting the user details and creating an email, some email content here. We create a mail item and we add it to the task queue for Confluence to send off. And that's pretty much it. If you install this in your Confluence instance, every time somebody changes a user macro, every time someone changes the global permissions, you'll get an email about that. And that's, that's invaluable if you're in a large organization where you have lots of administrators. You don't necessarily know what all of them are up to all the time. The code for this is on Bitbucket as well. I'd encourage you to check it out, or clone it, as they say these days. The next plugin type we're going to look at is scheduled tasks. So scheduling tasks is something that administrators do a lot, and there's built-in functionality in all the products to add scheduled jobs. So the periodic task we're going to look at today is a daily system status email. We want to know what the system is doing every day, what its memory usage looks like, whether it's gone down overnight, that sort of thing. So the email looks like this. Has a little bit of information. You could probably extend it with a whole heap of more useful stuff, but just for a demo, we're looking at the uptime of the system, and we want to know the memory usage at the moment. And that's going to help us when we come in the morning to know, did Confluence go down overnight? Is the memory usage out of whack? What's going on? Kind of thing. So the way a scheduled job plugin works is it starts with a trigger. The trigger module is responsible for kicking off the scheduled task at a particular time. So in our case, it will have a cron expression that says start this job at 6 a.m. every morning. The trigger kicks off the actual job code, which is a separate module in the plugin. And our job queries the system information service and sends off an email similar to the other plugin. So here's the plugin XML. I won't go into too much detail. It's just, like I said, there's a cron expression. The job specifies which class you're going to run. Here's the scheduled job code. So what this does is looks up the mail queue. This one's rendering a velocity template to format our nice HTML email so that our admins get pretty emails every day. And then it sends off the emails to the administrators at 6 o'clock every morning. And that's how simple it is. It's like literally one class and about 15 lines of XML, and you have a daily report in your inbox every day. So who thinks that would be useful? People use something like that, a report? Yeah? Cool. So the source code for that's also online. That's in the same plugin as the filter plugin. So if you want to go further with scheduling, one thing that some of our customers are doing, which is great, is using Bamboo for this sort of stuff. So Bamboo is like a cron daemon on steroids. So with the introduction of the tasks stuff in the most recent releases of Bamboo, you can add tasks to Bamboo for shell scripts. You can add it to execute scripting languages of your choice, and you can do this at a predefined time. So it's basically a really nice web front end for scheduling jobs. And although I'm sure the Bamboo product managers wouldn't be pushing it this way and saying, schedule everything in your organization with it, there's no reason why you can't do that. And as an admin who wants to get stuff done, I'd say go for it, try it out, see if it fits with your workflow and helps you out. So that wraps up my Java plugin point section. So I would encourage you to check out these plugins, particularly the ones around knowing when changes happen in the system. Try to write a plugin that lets you know when something happens that's of interest to you. That's one of the biggest challenges as an administrator is trying to keep up with everything that's happening on the system, and getting those emails in your inbox is just going to be another way of staying up to date. So lastly, I want to talk about tools for management and monitoring. The first one is the JMX interface that comes with Tomcat. So Tomcat has quite an extensive JMX API that can be turned on. And Confluence adds some additional behavior to that. With the JMX API, you can hook that into an analytics tool like New Relic, which is the graph example on the right there. It gives you lots of information about the memory usage, the request threads, and so on, so you can see what's happening on the system. So I mentioned New Relic before. For our hosted platform and for our internal systems, we use New Relic monitoring. And it's a commercial product, but it's really good. And the way it works is it uses an agent inside the Java process to collect performance statistics. And it sends them back to New Relic, and it displays like a really nice web page with all the information. So you can see this is kind of what it looks like. This is our page for confluence.atlassian.com. You get a kind of average response time here, which is thankfully pretty good. It's around 100 milliseconds response time. You can see the throughput here. You can see that we're processing about 2,000 or 3,000 requests per minute at peak. And down the bottom, or if you click over to some of these other tabs here, you get information about the slow requests. You get error counts, so you can see, there's 87 instances of this error. This is really helpful for tracking down problems, and you can fine-tune the timing here as well if you want to pinpoint a problem that your users are having. What's perhaps most useful that I like about it is the comparison feature. So you can compare the current performance to last week and last month, so that when your users come to you and say, the JIRA server is really slow, I don't know, it seems much slower than last week, you'll have something objective to back them up or otherwise, and then you can look into the details of what might be going wrong. So it's not just commercial offerings, there's also free and open source monitoring offerings that I'd encourage you to check out. Java Melody is a great plugin. I got this as a tip yesterday from one of the admins in the room, so thanks. It comes with a free plugin for Confluence, JIRA, and Bamboo. And it captures statistics about what's going on inside the application while it's running. So you get a page like this, basically, inside JIRA or Confluence, and it shows you live information about what's going on in the server at the moment. So I don't know about you guys, but as an administrator, I'd much rather have something like that than the default admin screen in Confluence or JIRA, which doesn't really tell me very much about what's going on. This gives you a wealth of information about whether the server is active, how many concurrent requests there are. You can actually look further down at the requests that are running at the moment. That'll give you information about how to run your system better. Another hot tip from one of the other admins, I've been polling some of you throughout the conference, is this Visual VM monitoring tool. Has anyone used this before? Visual VM, Visual GC? Oh, yes, that's cool. Yeah, so it gives you, with the Visual GC plugin that you can see here, it gives you live information about the memory usage of your system. So you can use this to help tune the garbage collection settings, work out what might be optimal for your system. So in terms of what you're looking for in a system like Confluence or JIRA, is you want to maximize the time between garbage collections, full garbage collections, and you want to minimize the amount of time that they run for. So this tool here keeps a track of all the GC times, how long they've run for. So you can see when you change these parameters and tune them, what impact is that having on your system. And that's incredibly useful. That's the kind of stuff that every administrator should have in their toolkit. So the next one I want to talk about is access logging. So access logging is enabled by default in JIRA now, I believe. It hasn't been enabled in Confluence by default yet, but I think you should always turn it on because it has such a wealth of information about what's going on in the application. So with the application access logs, as distinct from the web server logs, you get information about application-specific stuff, like what users doing this at the moment, what's the memory usage of the system when the request runs. This can help you diagnose problems again when you hear complaints from the users about something being slow. It also gives you an audit trail, which helps you, if someone said, somebody changed the user macro settings, I don't know who it was. If you've got the access logs, you've got the username in the access log that tells you who did it, so you can go and hit them over the head. The turning it on is a pretty simple matter. In JIRA, there's a UI for it. In Confluence, there's a commented out section in WebXML that you need to enable. So once you've got the local access logs, then you might want to look at something more advanced, like an analytics package. And something that we see more and more customers doing is using Google Analytics to track internally what people are doing with their JIRA and Confluence servers. So Google Analytics actually isn't just a hosted solution. You can also get a Google Analytics box that you install in your server room. And for people that aren't comfortable sharing all their information with Google, that's an alternative option for getting the same reports and useful analytic information that you can get from GA behind the firewall. So, if you've looked at a report on Google Analytics, you know what it looks like. There's basically, gives you a high-level overview of traffic on the system. And this is our confluence.atlassian.com site. You can drill down, you can see what the top pages are, you can see how people navigate through the system, you can get some idea of what's going on in your system. What are the most popular pages? Why, for example, is the 6th most popular page setting the Java home variable on confluence.atlassian.com? Well, it turns out that if you just type in Java home into Google, the top result for that is our documentation, which is kind of scary. Kind of cool though as well, I guess. So yeah, we helped what, 83,000 people work out how to set their Java home in the last year. That's pretty awesome. Looking in a bit more detail in the applications, sometimes you hit problems with indexes. Search indexes in JIRA are a really key feature. In Confluence, sometimes the search results might not be what you expect. One way to look into those sort of problems is to use Luke, which is the Lucene toolkit. And it's an open source tool. You can use it to open up your Confluence or JIRA index and inspect the data in there and see what's wrong. You can manually execute a search with certain parameters and see if the search results match what you expect. If there's data in there that might be corrupt, occasionally we hit people with like random control characters in their index. You can use the Lucene toolkit, Luke, to get in there and fix it up. So that's another tool to have in your belt. The last tool I'm going to talk about is caching tools. So caching is pretty critical to all our applications. And in the Confluence UI in particular, you can tweak the sizes of the caches through the admin UI. So we have a whole guide in our documentation space on what you should be doing with those cache sizes. So you'll open up the page and you'll see some of them are red and some of them are blue, and I don't really know what to do. There's a doc that tells you what to do, basically. Is it too big? Is it too small? It'll help you work it out. As an admin or as a plugin developer, sometimes it's very helpful to look inside the caches, help you administer your system better. So what we've covered today, we talked about scripting and remote APIs. We talked about some simple plugin points like web items and web resources. Talked about Java plugin points, and we talked about the monitoring and management aspects of stuff. I'd encourage you to go and use all these tools. Check out the source code, play with it, try and extend it and make your life as an administrator much easier. Another call out, share your knowledge. There are lots of really smart administrators here. I put about 10 extra slides in this presentation from tips from people around the room. Guys, if you have questions or if you have ideas, go to Atlassian Answers. There's people there, you know, a community of administrators there who are asking questions of each other, and you can share your knowledge and help the community grow stronger that way. So if you want to get in touch with me, I'm Ryall on Twitter, a bunch of contact details there, and that's it. Thanks a lot.